Do you remember the old Beatles song? All we are saying is give peace a chance. Maybe it's before your time. They used to sing it at rock concerts. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All I am saying is give awareness a chance. Right? So give it a go. And I was contemplating what peace is. And I thought of it in three ways. One is external peace, political stability, economic opportunity, good healthcare system, rule of law, environments which aren't disastrous, and so on and so forth. So and we could go on and on about external peace. Family relationships which are harmonious, work situations which are collegial and kind and polite, and those, of course, are the ideals that we all work towards in our capacity as social beings. So I, as a monk, work towards those values here in the monastery, you in your homes, in your businesses. And as we all know, that is limited because our powers are limited, our resources are limited, our influence is limited. Here in the monastery, I have a lot of power, so I can influence things quite a bit. My actions, or my temperament, or the schedules I set up. But it's a very small community. My influence in the Canadian government and what they do is very, very minimal. So anyway, there's external peace. Then there's internal peace, and that's the various kinds of moods and inner experiences we have, from deep love to deep hatred, from deep peace to deep confusion, and all the range of inner workings. And yet I think there's a third kind of peace, and I would say that's transcendent peace. And that is what I think that the Buddha's enlightenment is encouraging us to contemplate, move toward, understand. And the more we understand what that might be or what that is, the more the second kind of peace, the inner peace, becomes strong in itself. Because when I understand that inner peace, or transcendent peace, is awareness, and this is my take on it, and I have the trust and faith to trust in awareness, then if I'm feeling anxious about something, that anxiety is not inner peace, that's for sure. But because my attitude is one of non-grasping, non-attachment, knowing this as anicca dukkha anatta, not proliferating, not creating stories and not blaming, and all the rest of our practices, then the tendencies towards anxiety begin to cease and go away. So transcendent peace, to me, seems it would lead to inner peace. But if I didn't understand transcendent peace, I didn't understand awareness as the key to all of this, and awakening the key to all this, then the inner turmoils I have would change. Sometimes I'd feel fine and sometimes I wouldn't feel fine, but my attitude to inner turmoil would be not coming from wisdom, it would be coming from some disaffection, some contention with the way things are. So transcendent peace, to me, begins and ends with not contending with the way things are. External peace, let's say if we're having some huge argument with the neighbors, we're very samaki with the neighbors, really good people. But let's say if we're having an argument with the neighbors, I have to attend to that, right? I have to deal with that. But if I'm coming from a place of non-peace, then the result will not be peaceful. So I can practice not contending with things, and yet also maybe have a lawsuit. I could see that happening. So if it was necessary and someone stole our land, say, I mean, this is not true at all. Everything's sabai here, but I need to make an example. So if someone stole a piece of land by forging the documents, actually, yeah, this is true for one of our monks in his family, forging the documents, and then I, as an institution, as a charity, we'd have to go to court. That would be our legal responsibility, and so there would be contention. Right? I would contend with the people who I felt stole our property, but that's a social activity. But my inner practice would always be to not contend with the way things are. So that sounds paradoxical, but you could see how, okay, I go to court and the person lies. Now I'm going to contend with that. I'm going to argue with it, but I'm going to try to come from a place that is clear and present and responds from clarity and presence, and that's awareness. As for our inner world of emotions, I always talk about my own struggles with fear, social anxieties, and that kind of thing. And only when I learned not to contend with my own fears, not to reject them or just run away from them or blame them or distract them or even do any kind of practice with them, when I learned that the way of applying inner peace to fear was to give peace a chance, give awareness a chance. And as long as I didn't give awareness a chance, then I didn't give peace a chance, because what I was trying to do was try to get rid of it, which is pretty logical. Who wants anxiety? I don't want anxiety. You don't want anxiety. So it's a kind of logical thing, but it's not the way the Dharma works, because the Dharma works in terms of flow of consciousness. And if the flow of consciousness is infected with any aversion to anything, then more aversion will be the outcome. So typically, if we are hateful of our own negativities, and we believe in the sense of self-judgment and self-hatred and all of that, that won't give a good result, because that's not really being aware. I'm conscious of the fact, maybe I feel that I have a habit of being very cynical or something like that, and I can be I know that's going on, but how do I actually engage that? Do I engage that with peace, or do I engage with it with some trying to get rid of or trying to become something else? Hence, I keep emphasizing on this retreat, give peace, give awareness a chance. And you can only see if that works if you do it. So my own experience of like social anxiety and fear, it took many years actually of not contending with fear and not contending with social anxiety and welcoming it into the mind with metta bhavana, where that very, very strong habit, that vipaka kamma, began to cease and lessen, so that I have very little now. And that's a huge, huge relief for me. But it came about through an understanding that the liberation of the heart in terms of emotional content comes about from awareness and knowing things as objects rather than being the subject. That's the crux of it. And you've heard my stories, but I only have one life I can remember, so I keep repeating my stories. But I would be quite like frightened to give talks in front of people and so on. And it was really stomach churning, and it produced volumes of nervous energy, and my sweat would even smell of fear having to give a talk. So it wasn't fun. But through the good graces of Luangpor Viradhammo, he said, you have to welcome that. You have to welcome that into consciousness. And then he would use the phrase, consciousness is the escape hatch. And looking back, I can see that's what Metta Bhavana for me became. It wasn't that I was a loving person all the time. That was impossible. It was that my attitude was a transcendent attitude to the vipaka karma I was experiencing for whatever reason, which I never figured out. But there it was. And I never thought I had to figure it out. I just had to figure out how to be with whatever issues and fears and so on came forth in my mind. So you might think that you have to get the heart really, really peaceful before you understand transcendence. Maybe you'd think that way. I would say it's the other way around, that you need to understand transcendence. And transcendence, or awakening, or non-grasping, or non-attachment, there's so many ways that we try to point to the same thing. I often talk about the difference between knowing an emotion objectively and being caught in a subjective storyline. That's a common way that we talk about that. I think we can all understand that. Like, if I always joke on retreats, I say, okay, we're going to put our names in a hat, and then Yongpung is going to take out one of the names from how many people do we have today? We have 208 people, and Yongpung is going to take out the name from the hat, and that person is going to give the Dhamma talk tonight. And you'd probably leave the retreat. I suspect, unless you like to talk. And all of us, most of us, would probably have some slight anxiety. And then in that anxiety, what would we do? We would do something to make sure we didn't make fools of ourselves. And then what would we do? We'd prepare the talk. We'd write it all up. We'd study furiously. What are the Four Noble Truths again? And so on and so forth. And then the talk would come, and then our mind would go blank. This has all happened to me. I know this. This is the true reality. And then we'd have nothing to say. And, for so many years, I've tried to make my mind quiet. Now, finally, it's quiet when it should say something. So on. So I would say that any amount of, could you maybe open up some windows? Yeah. Any amount of understanding that the arising of various kinds of negativities is not a bad thing. Okay? It's not a pleasant thing. So I could certainly say, before giving a talk, this anxiety and fear I'm having is not a good deal at all. Certainly, I don't like it. But in terms of liberation of the heart, of the kind of what we call anusaya, the latent tendencies, if something is triggered in consciousness that has a real kind of negative valence in it, anger or fear, and you have the environment where you can witness it as an object, then I would say that's the whole realm of what we call purification, where things come into consciousness. They are known as sankhara, anicca, dukkha, anatta. They are endured. They're endured by trusting in awareness in metta bhavana, and then their tendency to repeat in the mind is lessened because they're not fueled by avijja, by ignorance, by self-view, by ego. So you could see, when I try to prepare talks, Luangpor Cha said, don't prepare talks. Luangpor Sumedho said, don't prepare talks. I said, I'll prepare talks. So What I was doing, I wasn't awakening to the fear. I was functioning from fear. Now, not, if I was a university lecturer, I'd have to prepare talks. That would be a different vocation. The forest monk's vocation is to try to speak in some way which is spontaneous, maybe with a theme. So I'm not saying that to prepare a talk is wrong, but in my case, the way I was dealing with the fear was I was preparing talks, but I was acting on fear. And because my intentions were from fear rather than awareness of fear, that did not really help me. Because next talk came, I had to prepare another one, and I had more fear. So I realized, well, that's not working. So then you begin to see why Samma Sankappa, or right thinking, is an aspect of intention. And intention is the way we approach this experience in this moment. So my learning was to bite the bullet and just be in front of an audience and feel the fear and do the best I could. And that was many years of unpleasantness and doubt and self-doubt and do they like me? Do they like me? Or they don't like me anymore, or all kinds of interesting ego states based on fear. But because I had such good teachers and some intuition around that, I realized, well, it's still an object, and my refuge is in trusting in awareness. And so the sense of what refuge was, Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, trusting in awareness, Kuru, that, in the Thai language, they have a lot of that. I'm so happy that I was encouraged to, and I trusted in that, because then I began to see that, there's less, and then it's gone. I have no more fear. Then a big funeral would come up, and then I'd panic again. Oh no, I thought I was finished all that. I thought I had no more fear. And it came up again. I said, fine, okay, here it is again. Thank you very much. Please come in, have a cup of tea. I haven't seen you for 2 weeks. And then, because I understood the pattern, I could bear with it until now. I'm a pretty happy puppy in that way, as Ajahn Pavro might say. But then, because that was such a huge part of my suffering, the insight, of course, applies to everything. And this is the beauty of insight. The insight into attachment and grasping and letting go and what all that means is true for everything. So then it was applicable to resentments, or to lustful energies, or to self-doubts and all kinds of things, because it's the same insight. It's the insight about attachment and non-attachment. It's the insight into this is suffering. The cause of suffering is attachment to desire. And that was my basic reflection in dealing with fear. I'd read the sutta, and Luangpor would talk about it, and then I'd have the fear. So where's the desire here? What does desire feel like? I know what the fear feels like. I know what that feels like. I mean, it's very obvious. So what's desire? Okay. Oh, that's the resistance to the fear. And I begin to see there's two things going on. There's the vipaka kamma of the fear, which is whatever, for whatever reason. And then there's the resistance, the not wanting of the fear. Once I had that insight in place, and I had to see that insight again, then it began to unravel and lessen, because now I understood that the problem was not the fear. The problem was the desire not to have the fear. And that's different. And that's easy to say now, right? But it was counterintuitive then, because my intuition was, I got to get rid of this stuff. If I'm ever going to be peaceful, I've got to do something about this fear. I've got a fear problem. And so I created a self around it. I have a fear problem. And Luangpor would say, no, it's just sankharas. And I'd say, that's very well for you, but they're my sankharas. I'm the one that has the blah, blah, blah. It would go on and on. But then I would listen and say, well, wait, what's a sankhara? What does that mean? Oh, it's an object. It's an object. And I started to get the language of in awareness. Oh, yeah, there is the object, and then I'd play around with other senses. I'd listen to sound, and I'd say, well, actually, when I listen to sound and I feel the fear, they are both the same in the sense that they're objects. They're sankharas. One is pleasant and one is unpleasant, certainly, but they're both the same. So then I began to see that the inner and outer are actually the same in the sense that they're moving and changing in awareness. And that I would consider transcendent peace. So the feeling isn't peace, I'd say, right? The feeling of fear is not peaceful, but the attitude is not contending with the feeling. The attitude is not rejecting the feeling. The attitude is not trying to get rid of the feeling. So when we talked about the definition citta, and Venerable Mercier suggested that when we translate citta as mind/heart, it is quite effective actually, because mind is the knowing, but then heart is that sense of non-contention. This all belongs. In terms of social reality, no. If someone comes in here and wants to shoot the deer during hunting season, we say, get out. You can't do that. Go to your own land. Right? So it's not a social philosophy. This is about liberation of the heart. And if you get those mixed up, you get very, very confused. So citta, if it means both the knowing, awareness, sati sampajanya, and this sense of broadness that whatever comes into my mind is dharma. Whether it's fear, whether it's really ugly and horrible, whether it's beautiful and beatific, it's still dharma because it's a sankhara, and it comes and it goes. And that is in itself, it's hard to define that as peace because you don't really notice it. You don't notice it. But what other way could it be? What other way could it be? So that for my own practice, then I began to see that metta bhavana wasn't a kind of dualistic thing that, you know, may I be well and may all the rabbits be well. Yeah, okay, I kind of agree with that. May I be well, may you be well. Yeah, I agree with that. But I saw that it's more profound, metta bhavana, than a dualistic me and you kind of attitude, which is good. But that its profundity comes about when you realize that the very sense of this practice is loving kindness conjoined with awareness. And that's why those two, for me, define the citta, heart, mind. When we do practices of loving kindness, quite often they're done as a kind of prayer. So we have a list of people, and we wish them well, our aunties and uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters and monks, which is good. That gets that going. But what is that? What is the sense of metta bhavana as just an attitude, just sitting here? Openness, allowing, non-contention. And then you start to apply that to, let's say I'm trying to get onto there's a video game here, the Zoom video game, and the buttons aren't working, or you know, something is amiss. It's not working. I have to give a talk. What's going on? That's contention, right? But broken computers they all belong, right? Let's say you're at the dinner table again, finally, after COVID. You can actually have dinner with 10 people or something like that, or you're in a restaurant, and the discussion at the restaurant table becomes contentious, politics or something, and it just feels really, really kind of horrible. That belongs. You don't want it. You can try to prevent it, but why not? Why must life always be harmonious? And it's not always harmonious. You open your heart to someone else, and they look at you like you're an insect. A horrible feeling, right? I've had that. Have you had that? You know, you kind of, oh, hi, and they look at you, centipede. Who are you? It's horrible. It's very hurtful. It's very hurtful, isn't it? And yet, that belongs. It's like this, non-contention. So non-contention is the attitude of acceptance. Sila and dana and karuna are the attitudes which stimulate us to act in good ways and prevent ourselves from acting in bad ways. But the ground of it, I'd say, is the sense of give peace a chance, give awareness a chance. And so metta bhavana to me is terribly important in that way, very, very important in terms of a kind of deep sense of accepting. And then when you do that, then you say, oh yeah, there's the peace. Okay, I get it. There's the peace. And even within the churning of old emotions, it's still peaceful. It's still peaceful. And maybe that's Ajahn Chah's still flowing water. You still have the flow of experience, and then there's the stillness of knowing. Okay, so there's some reflections. Let's do some meditation. Again, for 45 minutes. Was that the Beatles? John Lennon. Okay. That was John Lennon, apparently, from my audience. Huh? Okay. So I'll give some instruction and then we'll sit quietly. If I'm going to trust in awareness, I have to establish quite firmly in mind what I mean by that. And as I've been instructing, just simple recognition of this moment takes you to that right understanding of awareness. So if you listen to sound, and there's the knowing. And then if you just wait and not try to find anything or get rid of anything, just accept, you get a sense of the quietness of that. So returning to this, and this is one way of thinking of right understanding, not intellectually, but experientially. You understand this moment that is like this. So you can always return to that, no matter how confused or whatever. You can always return to, well, what is this moment like? And it's like this. And then in meditation, we're trying to sustain that and collect the mind or compose the mind, which tends to be scattered. So if we turn to the breath, and you feel the breathing of the body, and we're emphasizing the awareness now. And you know, one in breath, it's like this. And one out breath is like that. And then a sense of trust. Okay, I'll just try collecting my scattered thoughts, referring to the breath, knowing one in breath and knowing one out breath. And then if I try to figure something out, I say, no, I'll just be with the breath, thank you. So I'll trust or I'll have faith or I'll give it a go to just be the knowing with the breath. And when questions come up, am I doing it right? What am I going to do tomorrow? I'll say, not now. I think I'll just stay faithful to the breath, one breath at a time. So they're just kind of simple encouragements. And then maybe I'll be sleepy or I'll feel tense. And then I awaken. Sleepiness is like that, tension's like that. And allow awareness to figure out what you need to do. There is wisdom there if you allow it to function. Okay, so let's sit quietly, see what happens. So, all we are saying is give peace a chance. Apparently it's from John Lennon. Might have been George Harrison, the audience here, so many years ago. Jordan, do you even remember such a song? Oh yeah, everyone knew it, okay. Quite often the most peaceful part of a meditation is when the bell rings. It's over. Well, how do we do this, right? Again, my experience with Luangpor Cha was basically I just had to stop and observe. And I'd been traveling for 3 years and saw lots of interesting things, and basically, but I wasn't training the mind. So traveling across Iran and Afghanistan and Pakistan and all of that, and India, it was great fun and great suffering. Both were there. But then when I got to Wapopong, it felt like kind of coming home, I suppose, and just the kind of freedom just to stop. And I realized the freedom I had was to stop. I didn't have the freedom to move, so I was quite constrained by a very rigorous monastic life, which was wholesome and generous, but tough. It was tough. So I didn't have the freedom to move, but I had the freedom to watch, because the lay people supplied the requisites. I had a kuti, I had food, I had a good teacher, I had a good environment. So although I couldn't do what I wanted to do, I was doing what I wanted to do. I wanted to understand my heart and my mind, and that entrapment was deliberate. I could leave any time, but it's what I needed to observe the way things are and to understand them. So we're all trapped in some way, good, bad, or indifferent. If we're trapped into life situations which are dysfunctional, then we need to, as much as possible, get out of them and help others get out of them. If people don't have the 4 requisites, if they don't have food or shelter, or the locusts are eating their crops and all of that, we as a Buddhist community, in whatever little ways we can, we try to alleviate that dire kind of poverty that exists in the world. Because as long as people are struggling for food and shelter and safety, it's going to be hard to contemplate Dhamma. It's just survival. Some saints will be able to do it. Very good people get through this. My parents got through the Second World War. My mother was a very moral person, very high moral standard. I think she stole a potato or something and felt regret about that. I said, Mom, it was the war. She had such a high moral standard. So even in the face of dire difficulties, people rise to the occasion and have a sense of integrity. So whatever opportunities we have to be, I like to kind of play around with the idea that we have a Bodhisattva Project and we have the Arahant Project. And the Bodhisattva Project is how we serve. So Yongpung and the angelic sisters in Bangkok organize healthcare for 2,000 people, 40 doctors, 40 nurses, over a 3-day time in Chiang Rai. I mean, an incredible Bodhisattva action of service. And then the Firefly Group in Singapore. So these are beautiful things to do, and they give us expression. They help us to express our love of humanity and our concern for humanity. So that our retreat is obviously not that. It's another part. So that I just like to joke around a bit. I call that social commitment and our doing. In social sphere, the Bodhisattva Project, and then the other hunt, the Arahant Project, is the inner understanding, and they're both serving each other. So the Arahant Project is not a selfish project, but it is self-reflecting, and self-reflecting is not egotistical, it's awareness. And from that, the best resources that we have to help others come forth. So they're mutually supportive, and serving others and having a chance to help others is a tremendous uplift, gives tremendous energy and tremendous joy. It's hard work too, yeah, but why not if we have the chance to do that? So sometimes people will say, "Oh, you monks are selfish." And my first teacher said, "Well, it's the selfishness that puts an end to selfishness." Because it's self-reflected rather than egotistical. And I mean, no one comes to the monastery for the food, say. I came for the diet, what's the restaurant serving today? And no one really comes for those reasons. They come for the realization of Nibbana. And I know lay people sometimes will say, "Oh, that's too far from me, I have another 80,000 lifetimes of drudgery," and so on. But that's just self-view. That's a creation of thought. How do you know? So the Arahant Project is a very immediate awakening to the way things are, and that we can all do that. We're doing it now. Right? That's not out of anyone's range. And if you trust in that, so all we are saying is give the Arahant a chance, give peace a chance, give awareness a chance, see what happens. Just see what happens. So we have, like, if you're on the other side of the planet, you're in the morning time, you have a day of a practice ahead of you. See if you can really, don't even try to figure anything out. Just be real simpleton, just awareness, awareness, awareness. If you get some really complex question about Abhidhamma, just say, "Don't know, don't know." But you do know in the sense of awareness. So the mind can quite often create projects of intellectual, the mind will produce a doubt, and then you'll think you have to have an answer. That's a trap. You don't have to have an answer. You can just know, "I don't know." It's very liberating. You can't do that in business. You can't do that with your accounts. You can't do that with the safety of your family and the safety of your car. But you can do it in this kind of environment where things are taken care of, to some extent. And so, like trust and awareness knows this whole sense of people trying to become something or get rid of something. That's so powerful. The whole sense of time, the future and the past, arise and cease in consciousness. So what we're trying to touch is the timelessness of knowing. And then as you take refuge in that or trust that, you start to see how the sense of self is in time. You think about the future, you worry about the past, you're regretting the past, and to see that the time, psychological time as opposed to chronological time, self-time, ego time, is a creation. It comes and it goes. But the knowing is not a creation. Awareness is not a creation. It knows creation coming and going. Hence we say it's the unborn. It's not born. It does not die. Whereas the sense of self and time and all kind of the Kali element of birth and death comes and goes. So we say akalika Dhamma, don't we? When we chant, when you chant the Dhamma, the qualities of Dhamma, akalika Dhamma. Oh, what does that mean? It's like you're not trying to be aware for tomorrow. You're awake now, right? And any regrets you have about yesterday, you can only know them now. So you only have the now. And you're trusting in that. Just trusting in that. And a retreat gives you that opportunity. Just see what happens. You see what happens if you trust in that. Okay, I think that's sufficient for today.